Macmillan Audio presents The Twisted Sword by Winston Graham. Read for you by Oliver J. Hembrough.
For May. Deliver my soul from the sword, my darling from the power of the dog. Psalm 22, verse 20. Book 1, Chapter 1. 1. It had been raining without stop for 4 days when Demelza Poldark saw a horseman riding down the valley. Curtains of fine rain had fallen across the land, pushed, though not driven, by a southwesterly wind, bringing the clouds down to the level of the land, masking the sulky sea, converting the narrow lanes into chasms of flatulent mud. Demelza liked the rain when it was this sort of rain, so soft for late January after the storms of December. It didn't matter much for the mines anyway, since most of the work was done underground and the surface workers were used to being wet. But it was bad for the farm. Small though the cultivated area was, its living centre was Nampara House. Since it was not possible to go out at all without getting wet, one lived in a condition of partial dampness even indoors, and in spite of the roaring fires. The stain on the ceiling in the library, which was always going to be looked at but never was, spread some inches more. Ill-fitting windows leaked, carpets were damp here and there, but it was not the minor building flaws that mattered so much as the constant procession and presence of human beings. Muddy boots standing by doors, dripping stockings hung up to dry, coats and cloaks smelling warmly of damp fur and damp cloth and damp people. You couldn't keep the weather out. You didn't have to worry or fret about the house looking shabby and unkempt. One day soon it would be fine again. And out of doors, it was so mild that primroses were already showing dabs of yellow in the hedges. The rain had a saltiness as it fell on your cheeks, stealthily like a moist caress. It was deceitful, because you didn't realize you were getting soaked. You drew it into your lungs and it felt good, cleansing, salty and pure. Deprived of her eldest children, Jeremy being in Brussels with his new wife, still in the army but mercifully out of danger because all the wars had come to an end, and Cloence, married to Stephen Carrington, whom she dearly loved, though perhaps no one else loved him quite as much as she did, and living in Penryn. Demelza had spent much time with Isabella Rose, shortly to be 13, and Henry, only just 2. Ross had always been at her to take things more easily. "You're the mistress. Let others do the hard work." But she had found it difficult, partly because of her humble birth, which she still could not forget, and which stood in the way of her telling other people to do something she could do more quickly and better herself. And partly because of her abounding energy. But the abounding energy had been intermittent of late. So in some ways, she was now obeying orders. This did not prevent her from being constantly active, but in occupations of a relatively unarduous nature, such as going to see Judd and Prudy Painter twice a week, such as going for long walks across the beach or over the cliffs with Isabella Rose, who chirruped and bubbled with pleasure at most things. Of all the children, she was the nearest to Demelza in natural ebullience, though sometimes there was a harshness about her that her mother had never shown, such as walking up to the mine with Ross and meeting him on his way home, such as picking about in her beloved garden, where not much stirred yet, but where the soil was too sandy ever to become sticky or to turn to mud, such as supervising the thrashing and the winnowing of the oats, such as dosing her black pony, Hollyhock, with an inflammation drench of her own making for a severe cough and cold, such as visiting Caroline Ennis, who refused resolutely to go out of doors when it was raining, and taking tea with her and discussing life in general. It was a good time with Ross newly home and throwing himself into affairs of the mines and the farm with renewed interest. It would have been a better time without one ugly fact and one momentous decision that hung over her.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?